Welcome to Rare Connection, the podcast that where we bring together rare disease patients, the public, and medical professionals to share stories, spark understanding, and amplify the voices that often go unheard. I'm your host, Joanna, and today we're discussing idiopathic intracranial hypertension, or IIHH, or IIH, a condition that often minimizes a brain tumor due to increased spinal fluid pressure around the brain. Before we begin, this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a medical professional for guidance on any health condition. I'm thrilled to welcome Stephanie, a powerful advocate and leader from EveryLife Foundation for rare diseases. After years of navigating the health system and fighting insurance denials, Stephanie went into remission in 2024, thanks to an off-label treatment. He is also the heart behind the Rare Artists Program and the EveryLife Scholarship Program, both of which elevates the stories, creativity, and dreams of people in the rare disease community. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. And for those who may not be familiar, can you describe idiopathic intracranial hypertension as what it is and why, and what your experience with it has been like?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that very kind introduction. Idiopathic intracranial hypertension is a rare neurological condition that also affects multiple aspects like vision. So I was diagnosed about 10 years ago. I have always had headaches and migraines my entire life. And a couple weeks before my 21st birthday, I had a migraine that lasted 3 weeks, and my doctor said, I don't know what's going on. I had a CT scan, everything was fine. Well, maybe 2 weeks into my migraine, my right eye went lazy. And I just took that as, oh, my head's just been hurting so much. Nothing's actually wrong. I'm a very happy-go-lucky, go with the flow kind of person. So I also didn't want to think there was something wrong. I went to my doctor to get blood work at that point, and we got there. I was with my sister. My parents were on vacation, and my doctor said, I think you need to take her to the emergency room to get an MRI. The CT scan showed nothing. Insurance is not going to approve an MRI. And so my sister took me to the emergency room, and as soon as we got there, I actually passed out. So I have never had to wait in an emergency room because I bypassed the triage area. They took me for an MRI, and the MRI showed nothing. And several hours later, a neurologist came on the phone, up with the doctor who was, attending the emergency room, and they were going back and forth. And they said, I think we're going to give you a spinal tap and see if that helps. I didn't know what a spinal tap was at the time. I was just in so much pain that I was open to anything. And so the spinal tap actually tests your opening pressure of the fluid around your brain. So essentially, what idiopathic intracranial hypertension is too much spinal fluid around your brain. If you think about your brain like a balloon, there's just too much air, too much spinal fluid, and there's nowhere for it to go. So it just builds and builds and builds pressure on your head. And that was exactly what was happening to me. So my spinal fluid, my spinal tap ended up being about 3 times as high as it actually should be. But as soon as they did the spinal tap, and they did it a therapeutic spinal tap where they removed the extra fluid, I could lift my head again. I could move my neck. But I went back into I stayed a couple nights in the hospital in the neurology unit. And I remember telling my sister, I just don't want anything to be wrong. I thought this was it. My head feels better. And I remember the neurologist came in and said, well, something is wrong. This is not something that you are just going to be able to walk away from. My eye was still lazy at the time and turned in. And my doctor said, you're most likely not going to be able to drive again. And I was turning 21 in a week at this point. And how can you hear you're not going to be able to drive and that your independence is pulled away from you that quickly? Thankfully, once the fluid was off my brain and I was on a medication called Diamox, which is actually used to treat high altitude sickness, but it also lowers your spinal fluid production. My eye did recover. My vision now has my optic discs have scarring on the nerves especially. So I always see sparkles and lights. It has impacted me long term, especially with my short term memory. I have a really difficult time remembering people's names, and it really ebbs and flows on days that it's great, on days that it's not so great. But I've really had to learn to adapt, especially writing everything down in my professional life. I need to have everything written down or emailed to me so I can keep track of things. My vision, I can wake up any day and not have my vision if it comes back and it presses on the optic nerve. So I actually have a sign by my desk at home that says, I opened two gifts today, and those were my eyes. And that is something that drives me each and every day to make sure that I am living life to the fullest and not taking my eyesight for granted and not taking no headaches for granted.
Did you ever have your vision checked?
I did, yes. That
Yeah.
was as soon as I got out of the hospital. That was one of my first things, and that's when we noticed how much scarring there was. So I now see a neurologist, but I also see a neuro-ophthalmologist with Johns Hopkins, and monitors everything. I have to do those vision field tests where you have to click the button. That is one of my least favorite tasks to do every time I go to the doctor. And he always says, I can never tell if this is just because you don't like it or if your test results aren't that good. But thankfully, my vision has been okay, and I haven't had to do that more than once a year.
Yeah. I remember getting one of those tests when I first got Social Security.
Oh,
That
wow.
they actually tested my vision because I used to be legally blind as a child,
Wow.
but it um, improved with medications. So it um, with my condition, I didn't believe in my condition because it's so rare, and
Wow.
so I wasn't really compliant as a kid, and so
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, vision and eyesight are so special, and I think something that, and I mentioned, we'll never take for granted. So I hear
yeah.
you when you say that.
Um, what were your first symptoms, and how long did it take to get diagnosed?
That's a really good question. I struggle with that question because I don't know what my first symptoms were, and I don't know when they first started appearing. Um, I think about that pretty often. I lived my whole life with headaches, and I thought everybody lived their life with headaches. I thought that was normal. I didn't seek any treatment until I had more physical signs like my eye turning in. Um, they say people with idiopathic intracranial hypertension really is around childbearing age. And again, I was almost 21, so I fit in that age range, but we don't know when it started. I don't know if my headaches when I had had as a child, if they were related or not. I am very, very thankful that I got diagnosed within the 3 weeks of having major symptoms as soon as I went to the hospital when I got diagnosed in the emergency room, which is not common. It is not common for people with rare diseases to get diagnosed as quickly as I did, and I every day I'm thankful for it. When I got out of the emergency room for my follow-up care, I was going to school in Philadelphia at the time, and my doctor there, I started seeing a neurologist. He said, "No, that's not your diagnosis. You just have migraines," and actually undiagnosed me. It took me off the medication, and I ended up back in the emergency room just to find out that they had the right diagnosis the whole time, that it wasn't just migraines. So it's interesting that question, how long did it take to get diagnosed? Again, because I don't know when my first symptoms started, but also because I was undiagnosed properly. Um, Improperly and then re-diagnosed.
And from what I hear, it's anywhere, it averages around 7 to 8 years to get diagnosed.
It does. And if you think about that, and the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases, we've done a study on the burden of your diagnostic challenge, of how much money does that cost for you to get your tests. And if your doctor thinks it's something else, then you're paying for treatment for something else. And it could be irreversible damage that other treatments are causing, or you're losing really valuable time to be able to manage your symptoms that you're having and find that diagnosis.
And the other thing I find is that rare and common do not mix, and they like to test for the common conditions first. So it's
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I just think it's forever going to be a push and pull. I don't know anyone in my life who has a perfect work-life balance. And maybe the balance is the push and pull. It's a lot to dig on there,
Right.
but I have so much of myself. And at work, I'm going to give my 100%. And at home, I'm going to give my 100%. And sometimes it pulls in either direction.
Right. Their saying is, I am tired,
Yeah.
I am stressed, and my husband says that we don't have sex anymore. And that happens in the 30s, 40s, 50s, not so much in the 20s. And when you have time for yourselves, you have time for everybody else. So it's important to do self-care.
you're
They do,
pretty
and
much
that's why it was easy for my doctor to say it's just migraines.
yeah. So yeah, I can see them brushing that off. That would be pretty easy. How did living with IH affect your daily life, especially when symptoms were at the worst?
That's an excellent question. So I was diagnosed right before my senior year in college, and I had a really hard time moving back to college. My vision still wasn't recovered. My IV blew when I was in the hospital, so I had this massive um, bruise on my arm. And I just remember feeling so isolated when I started my senior year because I didn't know what was going on and nobody else really knew what was going on. We had this diagnosis, but it's rare. There wasn't a lot of information found about it. And if there was anything about it, doctors are so quick to say, don't Google it, don't Google it. Well, of course I'm going to Google it. And everything on Google was really scary. So that was really difficult. When I graduated college, I got a job offer in the DC area, and I remember my friends and family were rightfully so nervous that I was moving by myself. Um, I was accepted to the Peace Corps, which was my life dream. And once I got my diagnosis, the Peace Corps said, we cannot send you to a rural country in Africa where you would have to be medevaced if something happened because we don't know what's going on with you. So it kind of derailed my life a little bit. It affected my memory tremendously. It affected my vision for a while. I had those little, it almost looked like I was like looking in a fun house mirror each and every day. I have a tattoo on my foot. It's a sunshine and it stands for the sun will rise and we will try again. And that was my mantra each and every day. It still is that there are going to be days that are so painful that my head I can barely lift up. There are going to be days where my vision is not that great, but this too shall pass. The sun will rise and we'll try again tomorrow.
Like the attitude. Many people with IHH, I feel that I feel like having a brain tumor without, I feel like it's like having a brain tumor without the tumor. Um, does this resonate with you? And uh, does this resonate with your experience?
Yeah, also a very good question. I relate a lot to talking to individuals who have a brain tumor themselves. And it's a very I can't even think of the right word for it. It's a very interesting experience to be able to know, okay, my friend that I'm talking to that's going through cancer treatment and is going through radiation is experiencing very similar things that I am experiencing. I have that extra fluid there. There's not a physical mass present, but we're having very similar symptoms. IIH is a chronic condition. It's a lifelong condition. I'm thankful I'm in remission right now. I've been in remission before and relapsed. So I don't want to say one is worse or better than the other, but they're very different because for a brain tumor, depending on the type of tumor, you can get it removed. You can do radiation, you can do chemo. That all has their own aspects. With IIH, you really can't. There's no way to get rid of that fluid. You can't do a spinal tap every day. I could do a shunt, I could do a stent, but I frequently do think about the similarities between a physical mass being present versus what I have.
Mhm. So, how do you see the differences there?
I think the differences really are really just having a brain tumor. You have a physical
Yeah.
mass there, and I think with mine, the symptoms are so similar. The memory loss, the vision issues. Sometimes my limbs will feel funny. I'll get a lot of like tingling sensation in my hands and burning feelings in my feet. And so talking to people who have brain tumors, they experience very similar things. So it's interesting to know we're having very similar symptoms, but they are two very different, very distinct diagnoses.
Mhm. So you ultimately reached remission through an off-label medication. What led you to explore that option?
Yeah, that's a great question. 95% of rare diseases do not have an FDA-approved treatment or therapy, including my own. As I mentioned before, the first medication that I was on was actually used to treat high altitude sickness. I had a lot of side effects of it, and eventually stopped working. They tried a different type of medication that's used to treat migraines. Didn't work and made my memory worse. Eventually, I started going to Johns Hopkins, who I am very, very thankful for. I started going to their CSF, their spinal fluid clinic. And my doctor there was a specialist in IIH. And one day he was doing an informational webinar that was open to the public. I had never seen an informational webinar about this. So I attended, and he talked about the studies being done on this off-label medication. And I just thought it was so interesting. The medication is very hormonal. And a lot of the aspects that he mentioned really related to how I was feeling with IIH. It is idiopathic intracranial hypertension. So that means there's no known cause. I've always had a feeling that mine is related to my hormones. So I just kept doing research and kept doing research and research on this. Eventually, I mentioned it to my doctor. She suggested seeing an endocrinologist because it is hormonal, especially relating to other conditions that I have. I have PCOS as well, which is also hormonal. And when I went to my endocrinologist, I had this whole plan of this is the medication that I would like to try. There's actually a phase 3 trial that's about to start that was just approved in, I believe it was Australia. I would like to try it. It's on the market here as drug X. Can I look into this? And she has been the best doctor that I've ever had. She pulled out her whiteboard. We explained together why we think this medication would work. And we both said we know this is going to be a challenge to get approved by insurance because this medication is not typically approved or created for this purpose. And it's also very expensive. That led into probably the biggest challenge of getting access to this medication was that my insurance would not approve it. My husband and I sat down one day and said, how can we figure out these extra thousands of dollars a month to be able to pay for this medication because it might help? It wasn't feasible. I was in my mid 20s. I didn't have an extra couple $1,000s laying around. And so we knew we are just going to have to keep fighting insurance and fighting insurance and fighting insurance. I am very thankful that I work where I work, the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases that teaches people to advocate for themselves and to advocate with medical professionals and insurance companies and members of Congress. So that's exactly what I did. I created this whole document referencing NIH studies on this drug, on this compound, on aspects of these hormones, on my experience up to this point. And I told my doctor, I said, can you send this back to my insurance company to appeal the multiple appeals that we've gone through, the multiple denials that we've gone to at this point? I did get approval once, and then I was on the medication for a year. That approval expired after 1 year. I was doing pretty well at this point, and my insurance company said, okay, it's been a year, we're not going to cover it anymore. You need to go through the appeals process again or go through pre-authorization. And it was denied. It was denied even with those same facts. So I did not have that medication for 4 months. I felt my headaches getting worse each and every day. I knew I could wake up tomorrow with no vision, but we just had to keep fighting insurance, and I just had to keep advocating for myself. I eventually was able to get approval by referencing more and more of those NIH studies of the Orphan Drug Act, of statistics on my own disease. So I really encourage anybody to continue doing their research. Don't hesitate to send your doctor, hey, I did this research, please include this in the appeal. Some doctors might not have time to look through all those resources that are available for your appeals, and it doesn't help to do your own homework, and it shows your doctor, hey, I'm really passionate about making this happen, and you pick your own football team for your medical team. You're the quarterback on your medical team. So it's really up to the patient to continue advocating for themselves, which is hard on days where I felt absolutely terrible and could not lift up my head, but eventually I did get that access.
Mhm. So you mentioned you got into other uh, conditions that you have also, but how many rare conditions do you have? Because this is something starting to keep track of, because I've noticed that some people have up to 30 different conditions.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like
That's
crazy.
that's a very good question. I know as of now I have two. I have idiopathic intracranial hypertension, and then I also have another disease that's called empty sella syndrome, and that was an impact of IIH. So empty sella syndrome, essentially your brain where your pituitary gland is. It's like a little bubble, a little home for your pituitary gland. Well, the too much spinal fluid and pressure actually pressed on that bubble, where my pituitary gland is, and smashed it. And so that's what empty sella syndrome is. And it's funny that you mentioned this, because I feel like I am kind of going through another diagnostic odyssey. At the time I asked my doctor, they didn't even mention that I had empty sella. They said it was IIH. When I had my follow-up with my neurologist, I said, well, what's this? I saw this in the notes. This is another diagnosis. And he looked at me and said, are you lactating? I said, well, no, I'm not lactating. And he said, well, it's nothing you need to worry about. And I remember at the time being confused, but also saying, that's kind of what I want to hear. I don't want to have to worry about anything else. Now, fast forward 10 years, I have noticed a lot more impacts of hormonal aspects of things that I think my pituitary gland isn't functioning properly. So I actually just sent a message to my endocrinologist saying, these are all the hormones that I would like to have tested, because I shouldn't have taken well, you're not lactating, it's fine, as an answer.
Yeah. Um, the acromegaly is another one I've done a podcast on, and it's actually similar.
Oh, wow.
Um, so what were the big challenges that you faced when trying to get a medication no, approved by insurance?
Um, a lot. I think awareness, for one. So the medication that I got approval for gained popularity. Um, I'll be honest, it's a GLP-1 that I started taking before it gained popularity for weight loss. The GLP-1s, the hormones that are in there, are known to decrease spinal fluid productivity. So the first time I got approval for it was when GLP-1s were not very popular. The second time when I got that denial, that was when GLP-1s were really hitting the market and being glamorized online for celebrity weight loss, for weight loss. And so insurance companies were putting up walls saying, we're not going to approve GLP-1s because this is a weight loss medication. We're not paying for weight loss medication. I didn't need it for that. I needed it for that hormonal aspect to decrease my spinal fluid production. But insurance companies were saying no because of all the popularity that was happening. So that's why I had to do so much more research and put it in those appeals of why I needed this medication. Not for the weight loss aspect, not for the popularity aspect of it. Then when I was able to get approval, again, because of the popularity of it, it was difficult to find. It was difficult to get access to because everybody was ordering it. And it was on back order. I had to call multiple pharmacies trying to see who could get it the fastest. And it was so frustrating to me because I kept seeing so much of it being popular in the community for weight loss. And I would hear so many people critiquing, oh, people are on GLP-1s to lose weight. I was on a GLP-1 myself, so I almost felt ashamed of being on it. But again, that was not the reason I was on a GLP-1 was to lose weight. It was to decrease my spinal fluid production. So I think the timing of it was really interesting.
Mhm. How did you hear? How did you eventually succeed in getting coverage for access to the treatment?
A good question. All my research that I did, all the NIH studies that I referencing the Orphan Drug Act, referencing my medical history and how it could help up to this point, we did eventually get approval from all those facts. I will say again, I am dealing with this process again. Every year they say we're not going to approve this. So I went into remission last summer. And I credit this fully to that medication. But now it's been a year and we have to go through it again. It's been denied, I think twice, three times already. And so my
Mhm.
doctor and I have frequent conversations of this medication put me through into remission, and now my insurance company doesn't want to cover it anymore. However, they are going to end up spending more money in the long term because I'm going to come out of remission at this point. I've accepted that if I don't get access to this medication, and they're going to have to start paying for spinal taps, for emergency room visits, for specialist visits. As right now, they pay for this medication once a month, and I see Hopkins once a year.
Mhm. What changes did you notice once you started the off-label drug?
Yeah, I met my first friend who has IIH this year. I actually met her at Rare Disease Day. Maybe it was last year. Nonetheless, she told me, she said, I've noticed if I take the medication and I'm not feeling great, within 30 minutes I feel better. And I said, I'm going to start paying attention to that. And so I did. There was one day that I did not take my medication. I missed my injection date. And the next day, I felt terrible. My head felt like it was going to explode. I felt ringing in my ears. My vision was like almost like a black and white, kind of fuzzy, blurry. And I remembered, oh my gosh, I was taking my medication within 30 minutes. Exactly what she said. My headache went away. I started feeling better. I usually get this like fog over me. That completely went away. I had noticed the more that I took it, less frequent that I would get headaches, the less frequent that I would just feel that fatigue. And then the less frequent that I would feel my memory loss. So the memory loss was an impact of the disease itself, but also one of the medications that I was on. So I was able to come off of that because of the GLP-1, and so that doesn't impact me anymore. I still have memory issues, but it's been very much different than it was before.
You've turned your experience into a powerful advocacy. What inspired you to get involved with the EveryLife Foundation?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed, like I said, the Peace Corps did not approve me, and I remember being on my college campus and just physically collapsing because they told me that I didn't get approval to join the Peace Corps, and that was a lifelong dream of mine. Ironically, right before I got into the emergency room, I had an interview to be an intern with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I had no connection to the medical field. I just needed an internship for my senior year, and I ended up getting that internship. I worked with their volunteers, and that aligned so well with my medical journey because I was helping children with chronic illnesses fulfill a wish that often re-energize them and re-spark them to keep their fight up. And that was really what pulled me through my senior year. I ended up getting a job offer for Make-A-Wish Mid-Atlantic in the DC area, which is why I moved down to this area. And I absolutely fell in love. I wanted to get more direct experience with the patients. We got a lot of referrals from NIH when I was working at when I was working at Make-A-Wish. And so the Children's Inn at NIH is kind of like their Ronald McDonald House on NIH's campus, the National Institutes of Health. And I knew that's where I want to work. That's how I can work with the community. I applied for a couple jobs there. And my second time, I did get an offer to work on their patient programs team. That's when I first heard about the rare disease community. I didn't know about it at that point. NIH has their Rare Disease Day, and I remember seeing a sign displayed at the Children's Inn around when I started. I started in February, and I remember going home and Googling Rare Disease Day, Googling rare disease, Googling my own rare disease. That's how I found out it was a rare disease. And that really sparked something in me. Rare Disease Day became my absolute favorite day of the year. I would always have our staff wear their stripes. I would run around the whole office handing out stickers. I held events for the kids staying at the Children's Inn where we had photo frames, we had cupcakes, we had opportunities to write your story. And the more I became connected with Rare Disease Day, the more I knew this is exactly where I want to be. And then I found out about the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. I worked at the Children's Inn during COVID, and I also got married during COVID and got very burnt out. And I was on Indeed one day where I saw the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases, and I saw a patient programs manager, which is what they were hiring for. And I just think it completely fell out of the sky for me. It has been such a perfect fit. I know people say, when you have a job you love, you never work another day in your life. Um, I 100% believe that and agree with that. I feel like every day is such a powerful experience that I get to encourage people to share their story and make sure that their voice is heard.
Can you share more about the Rare Artist Program and how it started, what it means to you, and
Absolutely. The Rare Artists Program is powered by the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. It's in its 15th year right now. It started originally as a way to really look at that intersection between art and science. It allowed researchers who are researching treatments for rare diseases to have art pieces up in their lab, in their research facilities that represent the patients, the communities that they're working with. I have really focused on evolving the program to be an advocacy platform where artists can tell their story through visual art, through poetry, through music, and be able to share exactly what their journey has been. The Rare Artist Program means the entire world to me. I know that sounds so cliche, but it truly has such a special place in my heart. It has meant so much to see these artists grow. A lot of times when they enter this contest, they don't necessarily think, okay, I'm going to go to Capitol Hill and show my senator this art piece and advocate for myself, but I get to coach them up to that. I say that I'm a professional hype woman, that I get to encourage them to really share their story and know, number one, you are an artist. Number two, you're an expert in your own story. And number three, your voice really does matter. And I think those are the three biggest takeaways of Rare Artist. It has been amazing to see the growth of our artists over the years. One of our artists received an Artist to Advocate award through us with our Rare Voice Awards. And in her acceptance speech, she said, "Stephanie is my superhero." I very much appreciate that. I would not say I'm her superhero. I think she just found her voice, and I was able to help her find that by really encouraging her to know that her truth matters, to know that she can advocate for herself. So I'm very lucky that I get to see all the growth that these artists do. One artist is very passionate about patient experience and clinical trials, and he's gotten involved with boards and opportunities to really elevate that. So I am just very fortunate. And every year we get to bring on 10 new artists of our contest. Today is actually the last day to enter Rare Artists. So as you can imagine, I'm very excited to see who our finalists will be this year.
So what does the scholarship program,
Yeah. So I also run our it's hashtag rare is scholarship for rare diseases. So this scholarship is open to anybody who's continuing their education who has a rare disease, and they could be continuing their education in any sense. It could be that they're going to undergrad. It could be that they have always wanted to become a photographer and they are going to take an accredited photography class. This has been absolutely amazing, very personal to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think me getting diagnosed in college has really left a special place in my heart for young adults who are navigating their own rare disease journey and navigating college at the same time. The scholarship provides $5,000. Originally, we were supposed to give out 35 scholarships a year. Thanks to the support of Amgen and sharing these amazing stories, we are now able to give over 100 out a year. So this year we gave out 104 scholarships. And actually, over the next couple of weeks, I get to spend the days talking to these scholarship recipients and learning more about their stories. But it is so important to them for so many reasons. I think it validates them. I've heard from a lot of recipients that this was the first time that they felt like something was for them, as so often people will say, oh, people with rare diseases, we're not going to invest in you. When the scholarship says, yes, we're going to invest in you. We believe in you. We want people in the rare disease space to be working in the rare disease space or wherever it may be in the future. And then it also allows for that community building. So, how many people get the opportunity when they're in college to connect with other people in the rare disease space? So, we've heard requests from scholarship recipients to start a mentorship program, which we're starting this year. I'm very excited about too. And then, lastly, it helps financially, which is huge. There are students that have said, "I don't need a work study because of this scholarship." And if you think about having a rare disease, a lot of times fatigue chronic pain is an aspect. So to allow these students to not have to worry about a work study, just to be able to focus on their studies and their career is great. That they don't need to focus beyond that and go beyond their physical limits.
so, let's see. Uh, what message do you want to send to others living with IIH for fighting for access to care?
Um, I think I wish everybody knew and believed in themselves more that they're an expert in their own care and an expert in their own journey. You know your body the best. You know your condition the best. Oftentimes, we know our conditions more than our healthcare providers may know them. So, believing in ourselves, number one, but also not giving up and not saying no, especially when it comes to access for care. A lot of insurance companies will say, nope, it's denied. That's it. That's all you can do. I remember the first time I called my insurance company, that's what they said. And I wanted to accept that. And I remember talking to colleagues of mine and they said, that's not true. That's definitely not it. There's other ways to go about it. So don't take no for an answer and continue to fight and advocate for yourself because your voice really does matter.
Mhm. What do you wish more doctors or policymakers understood about IIH and rare diseases in general?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk all day about this. There are over 10,000 rare diseases, and when doctors, policymakers hear rare disease, sometimes their eyes gloss over. There's rare diseases, that means rare. That means I don't need to know about that. Well, rare isn't so rare. There's 1 in 10 people have a rare disease. Like I said, there's over 10,000 rare diseases. They think general awareness and general knowledge for the rare disease community is what's really important, but also knowing how much just bedside manners can impact a patient, impact their perspective, impact their ability to keep fighting for themselves. Similarly with policymakers, I'm really lucky each year that I get to meet with my senators in Maryland and my representatives, and they are absolutely phenomenal and prioritize healthcare. Um, hearing our stories and paying attention to the rare disease community and knowing the struggles and the barriers to care and finding real-time solutions are really important to me.
Mhm. How can listeners support the work you do and get involved with themselves?
Yeah, I would love to have everybody attend Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. I think the best way to get involved with our organization is visiting our website. So that's everylifefoundation.org. We have plenty of different programs and opportunities for people to get involved. We have a program for young adults between the ages of 16 and 30 who are interested in advocating. We have our art program, we have our scholarship program, we have a boot camp for newborn screening. We have Rare Across America, Rare Disease Week, like I said. So I would recommend anybody look at our website, see what different programs interest you. I manage our general inbox, so that's info@everylifefoundation.org. And anybody who's interested in getting involved, I would just say reach out, let's chat. Any way that I can help others find their voice, which they already have. They just need somebody to encourage them to advocate. I would love to be part of anybody's journey.
Yeah, the 1 in 10 that also equals 30 million rare disease patients also. So you don't put that into perspective unless you do hear that number. But and one other question that I didn't think of when I put these together, but I'm starting to keep track of how far do you travel for care? What's the furthest you go for that you have to travel for a disease specialist?
Yeah, that's great. I am very fortunate to live in the DMV, the Delaware, I'm sorry, not Delaware, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We have
Yeah.
excellent care here. So Hopkins is about an hour away from me. When I was in college, it was about 2 hours away from me. I would have to drive with my mom, which is not far, and I feel like I will travel for any doctor now. I remember one of my friends is a doctor in Baltimore, and my sister just moved back to Maryland and said, "Oh, it's a far drive for her." Well, only 45 minutes. What do you mean it's a far drive? So I feel like driving for access to care has just become the norm for me. I am very lucky that it is only an hour. I know there are people that will go on a plane and travel across the country to see a specialist. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I have one close friend with the same condition that actually travels to a different state.
Wow.
So she's in Nevada and goes to California.
Wow.
Uh,
I
but
know for Hopkins, and I don't know 100% how this works, but I know that they have to see a certain amount of people in state versus out of state. And because I lived in the state, it was easier for me to get access. But there was one day I was talking to my doctor and I said, "We're moving." And I said, "We're moving to Urbana." And he thought I meant Urbana, Illinois, not Urbana, Maryland. And he got nervous that that meant I wouldn't be able to see him anymore and that wouldn't allow me to have access to care at Hopkins. So I think it's so interesting where you live, how that can really impact your access to care.
yeah, and this was something sparked off of a something. Uh, I have homocystinuria, so Danae Barkis, the executive director of HC Network America, she actually posted a map one year. It's changed since then, but this is of all of the different the correlation between um, East Coast versus West Coast and how many doctors there are on the East Coast versus on the West Coast. The further west you go, the less doctors there are. And it's like, so we have people, so there's people traveling who will travel across country in order to see a doctor.
Absolutely.
And
It's
it's,
interesting. One of the policy priorities that we have talked about is access to care, especially for children who are crossing state lines who are on Medicaid. Oftentimes, there may be only one or two specialists in the whole country for a rare disease, and a child, if they want access to that specialist, they have to go through so much paperwork to get access, and it might not even be approved. And time is of the essence, especially for our kids to have access to treatment. And so, the Accelerating Kids Access to Care would allow children to be able to cross state lines if they're on Medicaid to get that access to care. There's so many aspects that I don't think the whole community thinks about or is aware, that limits the access to treatment. And I'm very fortunate that the EveryLife Foundation really hears the concerns from the patient community of hearing, yes, there are concerns crossing state lines for access to care, and that we have that opportunity to really get out there and raise our voices and say, hey, this isn't okay. A child should be able to cross those state lines.
Yeah. And some people will have fun with it and make it a travel situation, but it still, I mean, it's a huge commitment. I have even talked to one politician who actually has a rare condition in Arizona, and she was saying there's no hospitals for her condition in Arizona. I mean,
Wow.
oh, so she has to travel pretty far, and I've lost touch with her since, but so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. And that's
But
hard. If she's in a lot of pain or anybody is in a lot of pain, traveling is not fun when you are not doing well or not healthy, but
yeah,
people do what they need to do for answers and for care.
yeah. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your story and so openly and powerfully. Your strength and advocacy and creativity are an inspiration, and your work at EveryLife Foundation continues to build meaningful bridges in the rare disease community. For our listeners, if you like to learn more about EveryLife Foundation, visit www.everylifefoundation.org, where you'll find information about rare artists, the rare artist program, scholarship opportunities, and ways to get involved. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please know you are not alone. Help is available. You can contact the you can contact, you can call 988, call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling by texting. It is 24/7. Support is free and confidential. This has been Rare Connection, where we share voices from rare diseases, from the rare disease community, to educate, inspire, and create change. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, connection is powerful.